This show certainly hit a lot of heavy topics today, and certainly the nuclear one being a very heavy topic, where uh, Israeli and American military policymakers have thought about the potentiality of using a so-called tactical nuclear weapon
Mm-hmm.
on the Iranians. If this happens, this will break the taboo around the use of nuclear weapons, making it more likely that other countries will also use nuclear weaponry. And even if, say, the Iranians don't completely just give in after tactical nuclear use, they will likely use whatever conventional technologies they have to do massive strikes on the Israelis, the American bases, and the Gulf countries. If they did that, those strikes, even though they'll be conventional, will have to have something like the same effect of killing people that a tactical nuclear weapon will have, um, or even going lower than that. Imagining the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who would be directly injured by an attack like that. Um, and certainly, the Iranians have the ability to respond. They could kill hundreds of millions of people within weeks, destroying the desalination plants across the GCC, refusing access of international aid into the Gulf regions. Um, this could cripple the countries of Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, literally overnight. Um, and these people will have nowhere to turn because it is clear that the Iranians still would have control of the Straits, even in the case of nuclear detonation. So what the United States would have to do is another nuclear detonation. Would the Chinese and the Russians idly stand by as the Americans continue to nuclear detonate over Iran? Highly unlikely. Um, and actually, such detonations might give the Russians and the Chinese, who already have the technology, to directly aid the Iranians in nuclear technology. And then we're talking about a possible strike in Israel. Um, and you can see how things could quickly escalate.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, we would have to deal with the radioactivity of nuclear detonation, which will be at the whims of precipitation and wind direction. So people in Iraq, or people even potentially in Israel, people in Pakistan, what have you, might themselves be sucking on radioactive rain, radioactive water, radioactive air um, during the course of these exchanges. The environmental catastrophe that would unfold, of course, would be Herculean. Um, so, unfortunately, we're at a situation in a time where the Americans and the Israelis have engaged in this horrific war. The war's not going well for the Americans and the Israelis. The war's not going well for the planet. Um, and there is on the table the potentiality of using nuclear weapons. So, uh, it is a very difficult thing for people to think about, but they do have to think about these things because
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, we elected President Trump. We're responsible for whatever actions our government takes. And these actions could essentially lead to a nuclear exchange. And that would be the worst of all worlds. This is the end of American empire. There is now no way for the global order not to change as a result of everything that's already happened. Why? I want everyone to think about this. Okay. This is the end of the American global petrodollar oiled empire. This is why. The Americans have named at least four objectives. The first objective was denuclearization. They're going to denuclearize Iran. The second objective was regime change, that they're going to change the Iranian regime. The third objective was that they were going to decapitate and cripple, take offline Iranian strike capacity. And then the fourth objective, as a consequence of the war, is they're going to have to reopen the Straits of Hormuz. Now, the Americans have not been able to achieve, the US and the Americans have not been able to achieve a single military objective. We were told in the last 12-day war that the Americans had totally obliterated the Iranian nuclear capacity. And then we were just told in the lead up to this war that the Iranians were 10 days away from building a nuclear bomb. That is to say, the administration has no idea what the Iranian nuclear capabilities are. We've been told that we're going to do regime change. How many heads of states and military officials have been killed in Iran? And despite all of that, they continue with the same regime, and they've been able to continue their military war against the United States unabated, which shows that they have complete secessions that are decentralized in such a way that you can continue to decapitate the head and the body will still be able to function and strike its targets. And that's what we've seen across Israel. That's what we've seen across American military bases. That's what we've seen across the GCC countries. Now, that's been quite incredible. We've also been told by the presidential administration that we've taken off 80% of their strike capacity. Apparently not, because they're able to still strike all of these vulnerable and critical infrastructures across the Gulf region. And what about the Straits of Hormuz? The United States, despite spending over $1 trillion, refusing to pay for higher education, so we have student debt, refusing to pay for health care, so we have 70,000 people who die in the absence of health care, 500,000 people declaring bankruptcy in medical care in the United States. We spent $1 trillion on our military per year, and we cannot reopen the Straits of Hormuz. Every single named military objective by the United States is failed to achieve in this war, in the time frame that its military planner said that we would achieve it. Not only this, if we are to achieve any of these military objectives, we have to escalate up the ladder. If we escalate up the ladder, it means ground troops. It will have to be an overwhelming force of hundreds of thousands of U.S. personnel.
Right.
And by the tens of thousands, they will come back home in flag-draped coffins. So this is not a war that we can win without it being the most gruesome, bloodshed, of dirtiest of wars. And if we pull away now, we lose defeat. And if we lose in defeat, we'll show the entirety of the world that the United States military is paper mache. That despite our military spending, despite our aircraft carriers, despite our Raptor 22 jets, the Hornets, all of that, that we cannot achieve military objectives even as a mid-tier military force like Iran. And so the whole idea that the United States military is the military that will keep sea lanes open, that the United States military is the military that's going to police the world, all of this unravels, and with it, American hegemony. And the Iranians are effectively destroying the American empire. And no matter really how this ends, it is the end of the American century.
Yep.
It is the end of the post-war consensus. In the next 5 to 10 years, our lives, no matter what happens for the rest of our history, are going to drastically change as a consequence of this war. Because unlike in Iraq and Afghanistan, we got to show our might, we decapitated, we changed the country for the better for it's whatever. But with Iran, every single military objective we named, we have failed to achieve. Administration is on the international phone trying to talk with the Iranians, and the Iranians have no interest in talking with it. And what this also shows defensively, right? The GCC countries got into these negotiations with the Americans because part of the deal is, okay, we'll give you access to our energy infrastructure. We'll give you access to our energy markets. We'll normalize you in the international arena, what have you. And what is supposed to happen? In turn, the Americans are supposed to protect just countries, right? But what this has shown is the Americans cannot protect their partners. It is not true that just because you have American ships in off your shores, that just because you have American bases in your country, it is not true that the American military can save you. In fact, those troops that were stationed at those bases are now all remote, working in hotels, fleeing their bases in fear. Some of them have died. I mean, so that whole facade that the American military system was going to guarantee a certain way of life, a certain order, a certain political outcome, all of that's a lie. All of that's gone. All of that's died. We have no idea to the extent that our military system is done. Because what's going to happen? You think that the United States is going to be permitted to rebuild those military bases and they're not doing anything for those countries that those military bases in, but making them targets and America can't defend themselves against being targets? No, get those bases out of there. So we're going to see a retraction of military bases around the world. We're going to see a retraction of international commerce with the United States. We're going to see a retraction of the use of the United States dollars, the reserve currency in the world. And with that, we're going to see a retraction of the United States way of life, the United States culture, the United States economy. So at the same time that we're threatening to kill Canadians, that we're threatening to kill Greenlanders, that we're doing all of this, we are facing extreme global isolation and the last component of our empire, right? So our political prowess, our economic prowess is on the decline, but so too is our military. And that's the last faction that holds up our global empire. And what people are seeing is the United States could spend $2 trillion on its military, and look how it's being handled by an economy. What, Iran spends $10 billion on their military a year, not even 1% of US spending. And so it's really devastating what's being. The emperor has no clothes. The emperor has no robe. The empire is disrobed. It's naked. It's embarrassing. And beneath what would have been clothes is a Cankles taco
orange turd.